So last up is social services and housing. Christine.
Good afternoon. Okay, I'll try to keep things exciting, because I know we're on the last one of the day, and it's been a long day. So starting with our business plan, our KPIs remain the same as they did in 2017. We're finding those to be meaningful and helpful in helping us understand how we're doing in our business, so we're going to leave them the same at this point in time. So moving on to our new initiatives. I'll just go into the detailed section. We're keeping on our business plan the Service Delivery Hub Location Feasibility Review. And in particular, in 2018, we're going to examine some opportunities for implementation of service delivery hubs in other major centers across the county, as well as in conjunction with that school's first approach for childcare in early years locations in schools. So looking to see whether we can have some partnerships where we're hubbing in school locations. Our second initiative aligns with the overall corporate initiative of working on communication strategies. And in particular, we're taking our transformation of early years to the next stage. So in 2017, we did a lot of work on the initial plan and needs assessment. And in 2018, as we become the service system manager for early years, then we're going to work on a communication strategy to work through that ongoing transformation. And so that will increase awareness and access to services and have some positive child and family outcomes. Our third initiative is optimization of the One List, which is the software system that allows us to have people register for childcare programs. And so using lean methodology, we're going to do a second phase in the work of the One List in conjunction with a communication strategy so that we can share the data that we're collecting in that system, and hopefully that will act as a catalyst for expanding licensed childcare further throughout the County of Bruce. Our fourth initiative is Special Needs Resource Program. We'd like to enhance our customized software application that we have. And what we're doing with the project here, again, is we're looking at lean methodology to modernize and streamline the application process for families involved in special needs resourcing, and also our administration and reporting processes. So we're going to try to remove the manual work that we have in that area by engaging in further automation that we can use the new website platform. And so that will include procurement, development, and implementation. And so there is an internal staff dollars connected to that project and a capital budget for the software development that we would have an outside vendor work on with us. That is an eligible provincial expense through the Special Needs Resourcing Program. The fifth is continuing down our path of regeneration and development of the housing stock. And so we're using the strategic we're reviewing the use of strategic social housing assets that are nearing expiration or have already ended operating agreements so that we can look at, where are the housing needs across the county. We will have services there from a consultant to assist in that regard, as well as some operational costs and internal staff time. So we just want to make sure that how we're using those assets is a sustainable financial approach over the long run. The sixth is asset management, condition assessment, and forecasting needs. So the 2016 asset management plan had identified the need for a condition assessment program, and the housing staff will work in collaboration with the finance staff, and some preliminary work has already been done. And in 2018, we'd continue on that work to develop and implement a condition assessment program. And so eventually additional phases of that project would be optimizing the use of citywide software to do our forecasting needs. And so there will be internal staff time, which still needs to be determined based on the scope of that project and potentially cost around consultant services. As you're aware, the Director of Finance had put a report before you recently talking about us submitting for possible funds for that work as well too. So that's to be determined. Number 7 is the Housing and Homelessness Plan. And so we'll continue the work on the housing and homelessness planning cycle. And 2018 will be the introduction of the first enumeration process for Bruce County using that point prevalence methodology. And that will guide input for the next version of the long-term housing plan that will be due in 2019. And the Housing Subcommittee of Grey Bruce Poverty Task Force is going to act as the steering committee for that enumeration initiative. Number 8 is an item that was on our business plan this year and was deferred because we await the development of that software. And so hopefully that will take place in 2018. Number 9 is a new initiative around tenant satisfaction and engagement review. And so along the lines of communication processes, we'd like to look at how we're engaging with tenants, how we're communicating with tenants. And with that, consider lean methodology in any operational improvements we might be able to find based on the survey results. So that will take some internal staff time. We suspect we may need to use a little bit of consultant services for it as well to bring some neutral objectivity to the process. And then there will be some operating costs associated with engaging the tenants in meetings and forums and that sort of thing. And so what we want to do is provide meaningful data so that we're improving those services and also improving our relationship with the communities around our social housing units as well. Number 10 is the social assistance modernization, and so that was on our work plan this year. In 2018, we're really going to focus on lean methodology. There'll be a number of provincial initiatives that we need to implement again this year, and so we're going to use the lean methodology when we're looking at how we do develop our internal practices around that. And really, our goal will be to improve the client experience. The strategy will likely focus on key areas that include intake, client communications, and moving into benefits delivery with digital tools. So again, all in an effort to reduce administration and enhance the outcomes of our clients. So that improves the overall quality of life. The 11th is a communication strategy for a redesigned community participation program. So staff will develop and implement a strategy for that redesigned community participation program. You'll recall that the decision was made this year that we would end the innovation program and move in a new direction. And so that will take some internal staff time to set that up and to engage in the various catchment areas with possible community participation placement holders. And then take some time around evaluation. The next group of initiatives are our capital initiatives, and we can focus more on those in the capital budget. So I know we do have a number of initiatives on our business plan. It's important to note that in our portfolio area, many of them are driven by the province, of course, as well too, and so that's why we continue to see that we have a variety there, just so we're reporting publicly what we are working on.
Any questions? Milt?
Mr. Chair, Christine, on that item 5, what are we hoping to the results? What results are we hoping to achieve by this again?
So on item 5, for example, previously in Port Elgin, we had sold single-family units,
Right.
used the generation of that funds alongside funds from the investment in affordable housing and built new, where it was more sustainable to build new than to continue to fund the infrastructure requirements of aging buildings. And so we need to continue to do that process and look at other pieces of our portfolio that are at the end of their operating agreement. So we're not receiving funding towards those projects anymore, and in some cases they may not be located in areas of the county where we have a high need for housing either too. So we just need to continue to look at that mix. Okay, so moving on to the operating budget then. A reminder that we have 5 program areas in the social services and housing program. And within each of those 5 program areas, there's a number of sub-activity areas that also have individual requirements, but they roll nicely into those 5 program areas. So moving down, with regard to the transfers from reserves, you will see that we are making use of $107,912 for operating reserves. And that's made up of a pull for reserve for the home ownership revolving fund, for the home repair revolving fund, housing debentures that have been previously sold, and so we keep those debentures available, and then also $20,000 for non-TCA capital, and so that's what makes up the balance of the transfer of reserves there. You'll see that our overall operating budget is a decrease of the taxation levy of $319,581, or negative 7.5%. Looking at the categories, our salary and benefits increase is a total of 7.3%. The operating net reserves is a decrease of 34.6%, and really that decline in reserve demand is attributed to the movement of some previously non-TCA capital into operating accounts or pooled assets. And additionally, the decrease reflects the additional provincial revenue for the early years program. So we had been using some funds that we had in reserve for that program as well too. With regard to the pressure categories, you can see that the management team have done a lot of work in reducing the maintained service column where possible, so it's a negative 4.8%. Provincially legislated 2.9% just relates to the work typically that's happening in housing facilities, and so if we're doing less fire and safety work, that's where we see the decline there. And then we have an increase of 0.2% in the service initiatives area, and that's related mainly to the tenant engagement piece that we're looking to fund a little bit more there. So I'll move to the analysis. Oh, it's hidden. Maybe Betty Ann can. Do you think it's? Oh, there, sorry. My apologies. It was we have so many tabs. Okay, so moving to the analysis by total department. Get up to the top here. Okay, so that you'll see for social assistance, our gross expenditure change over year is $5,212. Children's services is a decrease of $159,631. And really that's about the changes with the early years programming, as well as use of administrative dollars on some of the new program streams that we're receiving money for. With our strategic community initiatives and funding, we have zero change over budget, so it's remaining the same as 2017. In housing services, there is an increase of $155,942 in expenditures, and much of that relates back to the Chippy program. We did receive increased funding for the homelessness program. And there is a decrease in housing services of $121,296, which really relates a lot to the maintenance expenditures. So there's $199,808 total increase in revenue for the department for 2018. And then when we're looking at the expenditures by type, you'll see that, of course, salaries are a big part of the increases in our department at $406,001. And so this, of course, includes the increase with the 2% for COLA, salaries and benefits, and the new grid. The base adjustment of $9,000 is really a net adjustment between the adjustment to base and maintaining services. And the things that fall into the staff-related costs are things like training. We've had some people that have completed the Loyalist programs, and so that's no longer there, as well as service recognition awards and that sort of thing. Contract services, it is a decrease of $328,290. A large part of that is a change in how we account for the Children's Services Fee Subsidy Program, and so I'll talk about that a little bit later. So material, you'll see that we have had a decrease in the department overall of $90,000, $423. And we have had a decrease in transfer grants charges of $84,280. We have had a decrease in fleet costs, and that's attributable to the end of the innovation program and not requiring that fleet van. And there's a slight increase overall for facility costs, which is really the net change of a number of programs, increased facility costs and decreased utility costs in many cases. So our reduction in our change over 2017 is $119,773. And so then moving on to the revenue. You'll see that we did have an increase in federal revenue of $41,000. We've had an increase in provincial revenue to a tune of $485,745. We have a reduction in our municipal revenue of $67,606, and that's mainly with the transformation of early years and separating from Grey County in the delivery of that program. We had been cost sharing some of that with Grey County with them flowing dollars to us. There's been a reduction of $61,712 of our own funds. Our fees and services have decreased by $197,732. So lastly, just at a high level on the departmental page, and I apologize for the error, the FTE is showing in the growth category when really it's a combination of adjustment to base and maintain services. So the 1.07 is reflective of an adjust to base for the preschool resource position that changed to full-time in 2017. So that's 0.4 of the change. 0.66 and 0.1 respectively are for OEYC casual part-time staff and housing facilities casual staff, which is just reflecting those changes. So our head count has not changed. And then I'll move into the analysis by the program areas. Okay. Okay, so you'll see in social assistance area, the salaries, wages, and benefits were an increase of $106,000, and really similar to all the other ones, that is the grid changes, the 2% COLA, and any grid increments and benefit costs to maintain service. Will I highlight here? So the material, I'll just note the ones that are unusual. The material changes of minus 14,000 is actually with a net change of programming between specific programming activities. And it includes a $7,700 service initiative to enhance client programming. So because we've made some changes in individual areas, that's the net impact that we're seeing there instead. So we're trying out some new programming in replace of that innovation program that discontinued in 2017. Okay, so then the decrease of $75,597 in transfers and grants is a net change of maintained services, the negative $244,377. This is a reflection of a 1.5 decrease in caseload. So we're seeing our trends that our caseload is dropping gradually, and so we expect that would continue, and so that's reflected there that we're still serving our caseload, but it's smaller. The provincially legislated $52,000 is a reflection of the increase in the mandatory benefits. So the people that are on social assistance are receiving an increase to their shelter allowance and how much they receive in benefits. And the $116,780 under service initiatives is utilizing what we have available to us for discretionary benefits. So we're looking at rounding out and creating a different program around discretionary benefits. Our total revenue increase in this area is $118,072, and much of that relates to us deciding to fully implement the use of the discretionary monies available. The net requirement change to the levy is a decrease of $112,860. And I will make special mention that this is the last year of the provincial upload savings. So this year that change was 2.8%. So that means that the province is fully funding client cost at 100%, and then we will just cost share administration. So parts of our budget that are administration related are a 50-50 cost share. I'll just pause there. Okay.
Ann?
So I probably should know this, but with the last year of provincial uploading, will the province in their funding still grant cost of living, or like other, that it wouldn't be, whether it was the Conservation Authority or some other budgets, they're flatlined? And so will social services be different from that?
We work on a service agreement with them on an annual basis. So some of those things are to be determined as we move forward. We've never fully utilized our 50% administration. So we do still have some available funds that are there because we haven't fully utilized that. And with the modernization process that's happening, there is still a number of variables that are yet to be determined, because as they take on different pieces of responsibility around the technology for creating client portals and different things like that, we're not sure where exactly that will go. So as we know more, of course, we'll be reporting back and keeping you aware of that.
Kelly?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would like to highlight that what Director McDonald has articulated in terms of our client base, that they are decreasing, which is a terrific thing for the county, and I'm pretty confident we're probably one of the few counties across the province that has seen that trend.
By how many?
Caught me off guard there. Exact numbers, I don't know. We were hovering like in the 650 households, and I think we're below the 600 now, but I haven't looked at our stats yet for the end of the quarter. So I want to give credit to broader than our group, because really the economic development that's happening in Bruce County is helping out that base as well too. And I think that's why it's important now that we're moving in the direction of the community participation placements, because as we connect people that are on our caseload to mentors in the community, that's going to continue to help with that trend. So I think it's greater than just our department, but I do appreciate that. Okay, so children's services.
Good news.
So the expenditures for this program have decreased by $159,631. When we look at the salaries, wages, and benefits, you'll see that they've increased by $171,269. Staff-related cost, same reasons as were mentioned earlier with the departmental page and social assistance. Our contract services, this decrease reflects a reduction of, let me get to the right page, $273,000 with regard to fees and services that were normally attributed to the parents. And so historically, it was called a parent portion for fee subsidy, and we're moving away from that model to a model where we just talk about the depth of the subsidy that someone receives in fee subsidy. So we used to account for how much money through our budgeting system parents were going to put forth. Instead, what we're doing now is just accounting for the full amount of subsidy that we're putting out the door, because parents actually don't pay that fee to us, they pay it to the child care centers. So just that change in how we're representing that change with the new child care service plan is showing that large number, but that's really what it is. In material, it's just some net change, slight changes of negative $8,721. And again, in our transfer grants, a decrease of $33,138. And so that reflects reduction in the use of consultant services that we, for a variety of projects that ended in 2017. And also a reduction in some costs that are now out of scope with the new child care and early years business practice guidelines that came out in 2017. With our revenues, we do have an increase of $11,491 in federal revenues. We have a provincial increase of $306,624. The municipal reduction I spoke to earlier, where we'll no longer be receiving the same amount of funds from Grey County for those cost-shared initiatives. We've reduced the amount of our own funds by $51,712. We had been using reserves, of course, to help with the early years situation. And again, then you see the fees and services of the $273,000 showing there again. But again, we were never collecting that money from the parents. It was a different way of accounting for it. And so the net requirement change to the levy for children's services is a decrease of $85,428. And I'll just take pause there.
Questions? Applause for applause.
Well, I will share that with my team, who worked really hard when we received the new funding formula and new childcare and early years guidelines in June. It was a flurry of work for 2 months this summer, sorting that through and using all of the available administration dollars to the best of our abilities, and that's what's allowed us to return that savings. So there is no changes in strategic community initiatives funding. Just a reminder that that is where we do fund some granting in the community for things such as Crystal Meth Task Force or the Poverty Task Force, the Data Information Sharing Collaborative, and we also fund the Children's Activity Assistance Program for kids to do camps and things that aren't sport related. And so that's staying the same. We're not changing that program at all. Okay, so moving into housing services, I'll decrease. So the overall increase for this program is a gross expenditure of $155,942. The salaries and wages increase were $50,000 in this budget. And then we do have a decrease in staff-related costs with a reduction of some training pertaining to Loyalist, a reduction in contract services, less use of consultants are required for some of the programs, a reduction in materials, which is just a few small accounts based on actuals for 2017. There is an increase in the transfer in grants of $114,393, and primarily that's made up of the increase in the homelessness program, because we did receive increased revenue, which we're expending for Chippy. The other service initiatives money that you're seeing here relates to the tenant engagement and satisfaction review. So we've earmarked a small amount of money there as well to move forward in that business plan initiative. And then looking at the revenues for housing services, there's a slight increase of $29,622 in the federal, and a provincial increase of $61,049. So the total revenue increase is $90,671, and this is really a net change of increase in funding pockets. So we removed any one-time funding that we had last year for IAHF or the SIF program, and it's also a reduction of the annual apportionment of federal funds in connection with the end of operating. But that is the net change to the provincial funding. So overall, the net requirement change to the levy is an increase of $65,271 for housing services. And I can just pause there again.
Questions? Hearing none.
Okay, moving on to housing facilities. So the expenditure for this program, I'll make this smaller. Is a decrease of $121,296. There was the salary increases of $77,552. We did have a reduction in staff-related costs, again, removing some training and or service recognition funding that wasn't required. Contract services, we had a decrease of $44,710. In materials, a decrease of $65,561. In transfers and grants, a reduction of $89,938. Facility costs, an increase of $180, and that's a net change between reduction in utility costs for the rental as well as increased rental costs at $1,850 as a total increase. So the decreased expenditure in this program area is really a reduction in long-term debt interest. $17,837 reduced in long-term debt interest, as well as mortgage maturity of $72,171. Decreased cost of electricity was $133,000. We did see an increase of $18,000 for propane, but that is so that we can continue to do retrofits, moving some things from electricity to propane to have some further savings there. The increased costs of water and sewer was $10,876,000, and there has been a reduction of snow removal contract cost of $47,000. So another contract went up a little, and the net difference there that you see is the negative $44,000. And we also had increased combined costs of about $10,000 for various accounts for building grounds, maintenance supplies, equipment maintenance, garbage, fire safety repairs, those sorts of things. But what I will say there too is that as we've been working on some of the capital improvement projects, then we're able to reduce some of our operating costs because we're not doing as many repairs in some of those accounts where we have brand new. And so looking at our revenues, no change in the federal revenue that's received for the housing projects. Our own funds, the reduce of $10,000 is that we've reduced using reserves for the purposes of some of the non-TCA portions. And fees and services, an increase of $75,268 is our projected increase in rental revenue from tenants for 2018. So the total revenue increase is $65,268, and therefore the net requirement change to the levy is a decrease of $186,564. And I'll just
Questions?
So that's our operating costs for the...
operating, yes. So remember that when I flip over to okay. Okay, so beginning with the dashboard again for our capital expenditures then. in looking at the summary of the budget totals, it's important probably to explain the decreased expenditure in 2018 from 2017 is primarily the removal of the infrastructure fund. So you recall that we had those additional SHIP and SHEEP dollars that we were working through, and so those projects were completed in 2017, and also it removed any carryover projects from 2016, because when we had all those different projects under the go, some were carried over a period of 2 years. The projections for the expenditures, in particular for the housing facilities, are based on the Consumer Price Index for the Canadian non-residential construction, and so that rate of increase for 15 to 16 is currently at 1%. And so we still believe that the index is the most reflective of comparable capital for construction. And so we do, in these estimates for the 5-year projection, include compounding of 1% annually. The transfers to reserve of $2,182,639 include $2,178,039 for the housing stock, and also $4,600 for printer replacement reserve. So that's what makes up our transfer to reserve. And of course, the transfer from reserve is primarily for the housing facilities buildings, and I will note that the increase that we've added this year is $160,939 in this submission. So we're trying to grow that reserve. The planned use of the social housing stock reserves for 2018 is a zero net impact to that reserve, and at the end of 2017 our balance is expected to be around $1.3 million. At this point, the value of the assets are marked at about $100 million, and the backlog of the capital requirement for housing stock is approaching $14 million at the end of 2017. But that's why it's important that we have that business plan initiative connected to the building condition assessment. So as you're aware, the asset management plan said that's an important part of us figuring out what we do to make a sustainable future around the buildings. So moving into the summary table. Oh, sure.
We started out at 1.5, right?
So this year, that one is the specific transfer to reserve for the housing facility stock is the 2.178039, and it's an increase of approximately 160,000 this year. And then you'll see the transfer to reserves, it's incremental in the years following. And part of that is when I say that as per the asset management plan, we're approaching a $14 million backlog. The reason we really want to do the conditioning assessment program is to see when we get into that system and start to say, this is something that's still in good condition and doesn't need to be replaced as per its age, then that will change that backlog story. And so for now, until we get to that stage, we've left it with incremental changes being suggested so that we fully understand where we're at in terms of condition. Is that okay? Okay, so for the summary table, you'll see the categories that we're using in capital are equipment. We have $5,000. Oh, did I do something? No, you didn't. Just go down to this distance. Oh, and it'll just a little bit. Okay. Okay, so we're spending a little bit less on equipment this year, and that's just small equipment used for housing facilities, so lawn tractors, that sort of equipment. So we've reduced that slightly. The proposed $34,000 in the service initiative under technology and communications is related to that customized software for the special needs resource program. And again, that piece is provincially funded. It's eligible for that. Furnitures and fixtures, we have about $10,178 there. And that's a refresh of some furniture and fixtures that are just getting old. And we do have some cost sharing in there with the province with regard to social assistance program and children's services, where we've got some eligible use of funding there. And then, of course, the site elements, exterior components, interior components, site services, mechanical and electrical, fire and life safety, all relate to projects that are planned for the housing stock. So it's probably easiest just to move to the housing facilities page. Just to show you there, we do have the major projects listed in the capital.
Not showing up.
Oh, I'm in housing services, that's why, so many, okay. Housing facilities, so then you'll see, if you've got interest and are just wondering about the particular projects, because they are lumped by type, this will just direct you to the addresses and the types of projects that are taking place in the housing facilities capital, because it's a rather sizable amount of money and maybe interest in looking at that. Okay, and then going back to the summary. So, as I mentioned earlier, we are using the provincial revenue for the 41,000 that's showing there. And then, of course, we're using our own funds is the use of the reserve for the housing facilities project. So where you see we're withdrawing the $2.1 million that's coming from the reserve. So the overall increase in capital requirement that we've presented before you here today is 7.7%, or $156,192. So our consolidated percentage change is a decrease of negative 2.59, or negative $163,389 for the department as a total between that capital and operating combined.
Questions, comments? Thank you. No. No. Brian, yeah.
So that concludes our budget presentations for today. After you have a good night's rest, we will reconvene at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning and hear from Planning and Development and Human Resources. And then we will present the two consolidated operational and capital. And we'll have you out in plenty of time to attend the Service Awards luncheon tomorrow. So again, I throw up the consolidated, so you made terrific progress today and learned a lot more about what we are recommending for 2018 and with the 5-year capital forecast for the next 5 years. If there are any questions, or if perhaps Kelly had any comments?
Through you, Mr. Warden and Mr. Chair, the only comment that I would add is as the evening progresses and tomorrow morning, and I know that all of you will look at the document, it is very helpful for us to get the feedback tomorrow afternoon in terms of what you're either finding completely difficult to support or curious about why we haven't made a particular recommendation. That would be helpful. We do ask that there's reflection on both the operational side and the capital side, And I'm quite thrilled on the work that's been completed by Betty Ann's team and the balance of the senior management team. It took a lot to get it to this point, to be able to demonstrate for you the detail between the operational side and the capital. And I think it will make it much easier for you as the decision maker and elected officials to see what the impact is if you ask for a reduction in capital or a reduction in operations. So.
Yep. Ann?
I just wanted to say I truly appreciate all the detail and the format of it. It's easy to understand if I could just remember it all. But no, it's very, very well done. It's the old problem. We still have a infrastructure deficit. Everybody does. It's how to manage it.
Okay, if nothing further, motion to adjourn. Mike, Robert, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Thank you.